Okay, the Shiur today, for a change of pace, we're, for the sake of heaven, להוציא את השכינה מהגלות, להשכין את המאפה ולילוי שכינת עוזנו. Today's topic, Bezrat Hashem, is going to be the times that we're in. There are 3 big days. Most of us are familiar with the big fast on the 10th day of Tevet, but there happens to be 3 in a row. There's a fast day on the 8th of Tevet, which was yesterday. Today there's a fast day on the 9th of Tevet. And of course tomorrow there's the public fast on the 10th day of Tevet. So most people are familiar with the last one, but the first 2, they are not mandatory, but they are brought down in Shulchan Aruch as a fast that certain people, certain righteous people, do commemorate. And we're going to talk specifically about what happened yesterday, which was the 8th day of the month of Tevet. And so let's start. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. If we look in Orach Chaim, if we look at 580, we see there that there's a bunch of dates that particular people, righteous people, do fast on these days. One of them is, the first one is the 8th of Tevet. So what happened on the 8th of Tevet? 8th of Tevet, the king of Syria, his name was Talmai Melech, he got 72. He brought together 72 of the sages, Jewish sages, put them in different places, each person in a different place. Brings us kind of back to when we're in school, they want to make sure you don't want to cheat. So they put everyone in a different room so you couldn't cheat. And they gave them some time, some days, to translate the Torah into Greek. The Halacha writes in 580, it writes there that the day that it was translated, which was yesterday, thousands of years ago, when it was translated into Greek, for 3 days there was darkness in the world. The world was returned to a situation like before the creation of nil and voidness, emptiness. It's a pretty serious thing that happened to consider it. What was what was the tragedy? It says that there was a miracle on that day, on these days. Every one of the 72 rabbis, sages, they all translated the Torah exactly in the same manner. Even though there were 13 times where there were changes, the sages on purpose made a change in order to either clarify a certain point which the Gentiles might take out of context, or a point that might upset the Gentiles. A miracle. 72. They say if there's 2 Jews, there's 3 opinions. Imagine that. 72 Jews, 70, and 1 opinion. 72 Jews, I can't believe you're still sitting there. It was like, wow, it should be a great day. Yosifun writes in historical account of the event, he says that this was a happy day for the Jewish people. It's a happy day for the Jewish people. Here we see the halacha that for 3 days, darkness, tohu vavohu, came into the world. Darkness. We know, if we remind ourselves, that in the second verse of the Torah, ve'aretz hayta tohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tehom. This second verse of the Torah mentions already the 4 exiles that the Jewish people will have to go through. Each word, tohu, vavohu, choshech, represents another nation that will subserve the Jewish people. And who is Greece? Greece is choshech, is darkness. Amazing thing. The Torah was translated into Greek. And then 3 days of darkness, who Greek represent darkness in the world. 3 days of darkness come to the world. But it should have been a happy day because of the fact that it was translated and all the translations were the same. There were no discrepancies amongst the translations. There was a tremendous, we might even say, sanctification of God's name. Torah looks at it much, much differently. Torah looks at it much, much differently. It was a day of a tragedy. Now, Ben Ish Chai writes on this point in the tractate of Megillah, the 9th page. He writes an unbelievable Torah. Okay, now get out your calculators or maybe your cell phones, and here's what we're going to do. He says the following, that on one hand, there was a tremendous opportunity for the Gentiles to hit the jackpot against the Jewish people. When you take the Torah and you ask 72 different sages to translate in it, and you're going to get discrepancies, you're going to get all kinds of different translations. But he explains it even more deeper. If you take the name of the king was Talmai. If you take the numerical value of Mr. Talmai, we come up to, if I'm not mistaken, Tav is 400, Lamed is 30, 470, 480. We come up to the numerical value of 480. Now, if you do, there is a certain spiritual force, we'll call it an angel, that is a female angel, and this female angel is responsible for inducing people, is responsible for bringing people down to do all kinds of sins via the subject of lust. Now, I'm not going to say the name of this spiritual angel, because we're not allowed to say various angels' names, but we'll just say the beginning initials are Lamed and Yud. Those are the beginning letters of the name. If you take the numerical value of this angel, this spiritual force that is responsible for trying to bring us down when it comes to immodest behavior, then it comes out to 480, the exact numerical value of the king of Greece. And we know, we've said in the past, if you think about all kinds of illicit behavior, homosexuality was rampant in Greece. So when we think about immodest behavior, Greece comes to mind as number 1 on the list. So folks, an amazing thing. So the Ben Ish Chai writes and tells us that, think about the power that's going here. We have a king whose numerical value, his name, his numerical value is equal to the spiritual force of bringing people down to their knees when it comes to being modest and bringing us to immodest behavior, immodest sexual behavior. So you had all this force going for him, but he made a mistake. You know, in the Hebrew they call it sometimes when you're in soccer, they call it gol atzmi. When somebody on our team, he kicks by mistake, he kicks the soccer ball into his own net by mistake. Or as we say in English, the king of Greece, he made a mistake, he shot himself in the foot. What did he ask for? He asked for 72 sages. That's very unusual. Why did he ask for 72? Why didn't he ask for 10? Maybe a minion. Hey, let's go for a minion. Why didn't he ask for 3? A zimun, you know, when you eat together, 3 people is enough. Why didn't he ask for 20? 26. 72? Where does that come from? The Ben Ish Chai writes an unbelievable Torah. Put on a seatbelt for this. 72 is the numerical value of the word chesed, kindness. Which means that the king, even though he had everything going for him to bring the Jewish people to have a downfall, he shot himself in the leg. He shot himself in the leg by taking 72. 72 is the numerical value of chesed, of kindness. That's exactly what Hashem did. Hashem created this tremendous miracle. Hashem made this tremendous miracle of kindness that all the 72, they translated exactly the same manner. So therefore he shot himself in the leg. Okay. If we open up our books to Masechet Sofrim, in the first chapter, the 7th and 8th law, we see a little bit of a different account. We see something very interesting. We see in the 7th law that there was a time where the Torah was translated into Greek, and then the next law talks about the Torah being translated once again into Greek by 72 sages. And so what's going on here? Were there two incidents of the Torah being translated into Greek? So, first of all, before we get into were there two incidents or was just one, first of all, if we look in the language of this, the tractate of Sofrim, it says the following. It says that this day that the Torah was translated, which was yesterday, the 8th of Tevet, some thousands of years ago, before the time of Hanukkah. When this was translated, because we know that the Greeks, they ruled over the Jewish people for 180 years, long time. So when the Torah was translated by the 72 sages, they were forced to translate it into Greek. This day was more difficult than when the Jewish people sinned in the desert via the golden calf. Amazing thing. Once again, we would think that this would be a day of joy. The nations of the world can now understand, the main language of the world was Greek. People could understand the Torah. People could see the beauty of the Torah. This is a great time for us. Torah teaches us differently. This was a day of tragedy. Either 3 days of darkness came into the world, and we see this was even more difficult than the day when the Jewish people on the 17th day of Tammuz, when we sinned vis-a-vis the golden calf. Now think about that. Every punishment that a person receives today, there's a part of it is from what happened thousands of years ago, 3,300 something years ago, on the 17th day of Tammuz with the golden calf. Why? Because what would you rather have? If you have to be punished, would you rather have someone take a boulder and put it on your head? Or would you rather take that boulder and make it into little pebbles and have somebody every day or so throw one at you? Of course, you'd rather have those little pebbles thrown at you. You don't want a boulder thrown at your head because you're going to die. So Hashem had compassion on us, and He says, you know what? Because of the fact that you did such a terrible thing after receiving the Torah, after receiving the Torah some 40 days before, now you're worshiping the golden calf. This is what you're doing. So I'm going to give you a punishment. And every day that the Jewish people receive punishment, till this very minute, there is part of that punishment which is called a little pebble, which we still have payments to return what we did 3,330 something years ago. Unbelievable.
Didn't Moshe Rabbeinu write על האבנים, certain receive,
excellent. Avram. Okay, right. Avram is mentioning that in the tractate of Sotah, on the 35th page, talks about, we'll get to that with God's help, we'll get to the fact that the Torah was given in some degree to the nations of the world. So what's the big deal? Now, Rav Yaakov Emden, on his Perush on the Shas, on the Talmud, says an unbelievable thing, and this is an important point. Listen closely. The Yavetz, as he's called, Rav Yaakov Emden, he says that we learn from Tractate Sofrim that there were two events, very different one from another. The Torah was translated twice into Greek. One time it was okay. One time there was a tremendous sanctification of God's name, and one time it brought to the world darkness. It brought to the world a sin that was more serious than the golden calf. What's the difference? Listen to what he writes. Rav Yaakov Emden writes the following. The first translation took place in the time of the king Talmai, but this Talmai is a position. It's like saying the president. There's a lot of presidents, but we use the term president for everyone. There's President Obama, there's President Truman. They're all called the president. Paro was not one person. Paro were all the kings of Egypt were called Paro. They had different names, but they were titled Paro. So Talmai is a name of is a position. So the king whose name was Philadelphia, I guess maybe that's where they came from. Philadelphia, freedom, yeah, Elton John. But this king Philadelphia, listen to what he writes. Haya yadua ke'ohev Yisrael gadol. He was a big lover of the Jewish people. This king. Bikesh be'achna'a gdola. He asked, not out of haughtiness, not out of it's my position. I'm the king. I do what I want. He came with his head down. He came crawling into the Jewish people, begging them to let him see the light of the Torah. So we have a person who's a real lover of the Jewish people. And number two, he's coming not as a king, not with power, not with threats. He's coming crawling in and with his head down, please allow me to see the beauty of the Torah. Uvepizur hon rav shel kesef. He put down, he gave the Jewish people, he gave them tons of money in order that they would they would translate the Torah for him. He would be able to see the beauty of the Torah, the greatness of the Torah, the holiness of the Torah. He put his, he's put his money where his mouth is. Uvidoronot gdolim ve'atsumot. He gave tremendous presents to the temple, to the Beit HaMikdash. So Rav Yaakov Emden says, this person, this Talmai, this king, this person had the right idea. He had the right approach to the Torah. He wasn't looking to one-upmanship us. He wasn't looking to become equal to the Jewish people, to become either better than the Jewish people. He wasn't looking to use the Torah against the Jewish people. He really came for the sake of heaven. So Rav Yaakov Emden says the first translation of the Torah into Greek was not a problem. It was a sanctification of God's name. Which reminds us, it could be what Yossi Funt says, that this was a tremendous sanctification of God's name. Perhaps he was talking about the first time that the Torah was translated. But the second time, there's no comparison. There's no comparison to the two times. The second time was a nightmare for the Jewish people, for the world. Okay. Let's bring us back to the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch. We said a very interesting explanation. There were 3 days. There were 3 days of darkness. Now, 3 days of darkness, that has to kind of ring a bell by us. It should ring a bell by us. Number one, in Egypt, how many days of darkness was there? 3. 3 days of darkness. Okay, so it rings a bell of darkness. Why were there 3 days of darkness? Because this was to separate the Jews, the real Jews, from the Jews that did not want to leave Egypt and were going to be killed. So that in order that there not be a desecration of God's name, where the Egyptians see all these Jews dead, because they don't want to leave Egypt after 210 years of being slaves. So Hashem brought to the world 3 days of darkness to separate, so they would not be able to see, so there would not be a desecration of God's name. Okay, now that number 3 comes back again. After we get out of Egypt, 50 days later, we receive the Torah. And Hashem tells us something, get ready for the Torah. How many days?
3 days.
3 days. Okay, now let's go forward, fast forward in history. Now we're in Purim time. Okay, in Purim, it says in the Gemara, Shabbat, that at Mount Sinai, the Jewish people received the Torah, but they were coerced to receive the Torah. They received it as Hashem uplifted, Hashem picked up a mountain and said, you want to receive it? Okay. If not, this is your burial place here. So the difference is that during the time of Mount Sinai, the Jewish people received the Torah, but they received it because they were coerced. When did we receive the Torah? Through happiness and through volunteer. That was during Purim. Now, how many days did they fast during Purim? How many days did Esther and Mordechai fast?
3.
3 days. So we see that then when there's a connection. Number 1, when we have the number 3, we see that there's a connection between either receiving the Torah or being cut off from the Torah. In the times of the Jews in Egypt, those that did not want to leave, 3 represented going against the 3. We have Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the 3 forefathers. So that represented, all these 3 forefathers represented being connected and continuing the chain of the Torah, continuing it. So those people that wanted to stay in Egypt and not continue the chain of Torah, of Judaism, they were removed. 3, you're removed from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You're removed from the Jewish people. Now we come to Mount Sinai, and we have once again 3-day preparation. Why? Because if you want to be connected to God, if you want to be connected to the Torah, if you want to be connected to Eretz Yisrael, right? The 3. We have the Torah, we have Eretz Yisrael, and we have the Jewish people. If you want those in Egypt, they did not want to be connected to the land of Israel. So they were destroyed. Okay? In the times of when the Torah came down on Har Sinai, we were once again reconnected to the 3. Not just Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also we were connected to the land of Israel, to the Torah of Israel, and to the people of Israel. That's what we received upon, that's what we accepted upon ourselves, the yoke of those 3 things. Now, once again, during Purim, during the time of Purim, we receive once again the Torah, this time through the 3 days once again, because we represent the three foundations of the Torah, and we once again receive the Torah. So very interesting. When we translate the Torah into Greek, 3 days of darkness come to the world. The number 3 and also darkness. Because once again, the Torah is always connected to 3. But here it's 3 days of darkness. Here it's being cut off. Here we're being cut off. We're being cut off of Torah, we're being cut off of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and we're being cut off of the people of Israel. Okay, now, getting back to what's the problem here. We have the Torah translated, even though it seems like it was a happy day, it was happy times, that the Torah was translated in exactly the proper, each one of the sages correctly translated every single word. There was no discrepancies between the words. Okay, so we talked about the first king of Greece. His intentions were very pure, very holy. He put his money where his mouth is. He gave money. He crawled to the Jewish people and he put his head down just to see the glory of the Torah. But another king of Greece, he had totally different idea. What was his idea? Now here, if we look back into history and we take the Jewish people and the Greek people will see that there's always some kind of connection between these two groups. Let's look into it. If we go back to the portion of the week of Noah, we see very interesting that when Noah and his family get out of the ark, Noah plants a vineyard, and then he drinks wine, and he drinks too much wine, and he becomes incarcerated, he becomes drunk. And what happens? One of his 3 sons named Ham, he does a very, very immodest action against his father. He strips him of his clothes and does something which is very, very, very immodest. Meanwhile, the other 2 brothers come along and they see their father in such a terrible position that he's naked without any clothes. So what does he do? What do they do? Shem, the Jewish people are descendants of Shem. That's why when they say anti-Semitism, anti-Shemiut, it's against Shem. Anti-Semitism, Shemitism, against the son of Shem, the Noah. That's why it's called anti-Semitism. It's on the name of Shem. So Shem calls out to his brother Yefet, who's the father of Greece, who's the father of Gog and Magog, the last battle in the world. The 70 nations are gathered by Gog and Magog. Because if you do the numerical value of those 2 names, Gog and Magog, you will come out to the numerical value of 70. Because they will lead the 70 nations against the Jewish people. They're from descendants of Yefet. Okay? So we're really brothers here. You have Shem, the Jewish people that came out of Shem, and then you have Yefet, who came out Greece, Yavan, and then you have later on Gog and Magog, the same family coming out here. So we see that there are similarities here. It was those 2 brothers, Yefet and Shem, that went and covered their father, but there's a difference. They're not equal. Why aren't they equal? Because who was the mover? Who was the mover in the action? The mover in the action was Shem. Shem had to drag his brother Yefet. He said, "Come on, buddy." And he drags him in to do what had to be done, is to cover their father. They turned around, they put on a dress, a blanket, so to speak, on their father, and they turned around so they wouldn't have even a chance to, God forbid, to see their father. As we know, for example, if a person goes to a swimming pool or a mikveh with their son, you're not allowed to be in the same shower or naked with your son. So if you go to a mikveh, you go to a swimming pool, you're not allowed to take a shower with your own son because it's not considered to be respect for one's father. So here we have a case here where they turned around in order to be 100% certain that they wouldn't by mistake look and see something that was immodest by their father. Okay, so we see on one hand they are similar. They both come and do a great deed. They both are rewarded, but totally different rewards. We receive a reward of a talit, of the holy fringes, the 4-cornered garment, the fringes. We receive the tzitzit. What do they receive? They receive a reward that they will be buried. They merit to be buried in the last war of the world, the Third World War, which will be the war of Gog and Magog, which is family of Yefet, of Greece. They will be led against the Jewish people. Even though they are wicked, they will be buried on the battlefield. Why? Because God remembers every action that a person does. It doesn't matter whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, everybody receives a reward. But you receive a just reward. And even though they did a similar act, you cannot compare the two. If we have here, if somebody is organizing to a class of Torah, someone's organizing to have a prayer, to have 10 people at a prayer, you cannot compare his reward to a person that agrees to come. Because he's doing all the organization. He's making the